Today, I want to talk about our communication and control and monitoring device called the Gateway, as well as the Insight2. Sandra Herrera. I am an application engineer for Schneider Electric. Here's my email address in case you want to reach me directly with any questions. Before we get into the specifics of the monitoring and control, I want to show you the compatible products. And the Gateway, as well as the Insight2, is compatible with the XW Pro, XW Plus, SW, both of the MPPTs, the 60 and the 80. Although I'm not showing it here on the screen, it is also compatible with the accessories, which are the automatic generator start, the system control panel, and the battery monitor. You would be able to see all of the devices in the network. The hardware part of the monitoring and control is actually the gateway. So the gateway is the hardware of the device. So you can actually monitor your system real time directly there on site. You don't even need to have internet. You don't even need to have a router. You can actually monitor the system directly, or you can do connect it to the internet and use the Insight2 platform. The gateway itself is very powerful because it will give you all the analytics. You can monitor all the performance of the systems, and I'll go into a little more detail on that. Also, data logging and firmware updates. So you will be able to update all of the devices in the network using the gateway. So you have a couple of options here for the gateway to connect to the internet. Obviously, the simplest thing is via Wi-Fi. You just simply log the gateway to the Wi-Fi, and you don't need to have any wires. But you may have situations where the system or the gateway is not in a good Wi-Fi spot. Maybe there's low quality for the Wi-Fi. You also have the choice of connecting it using a Cat5. So you can do Ethernet port here to the customer's router, and that way the gateway can connect to the internet. Additional, it has dual SAN bus channel. And what you can do with these channels is there is a limited number of devices that can be connected in the SAN bus network. And maybe some of you may not be familiar what the SAN bus network is. That is the communication protocol for all of the Schneider Next products. So this is how all of the inverters and solar charge controllers communicate with each other. However, there is a maximum number of units that can be connected to the network. With the dual SAN bus channel, what we've done is now we are extending the number of devices that you can plug into the network. You can still see them all together, right? So although you may have a number of inverters on one side of the channel and a number of charge controllers on the other side, you will still be able to monitor them together and see them together. You see a power supply, AC power supply connection here on the gateway. However, for the most part, the gateway will get its power from the SAN bus network. So this power supply will not be used for most systems. Additionally, and maybe some of you are from California, the gateway allows us to comply with the communication protocol IEEE 2030.5, which is actually part of the California Rule 21 Phase 2, where the utility companies have required us because they want to manage the end user energy. With the gateway, we can communicate between the client and the aggregator server. The aggregators are going to be the entities who are going to manage all these distributed generations. So we are complying with the latest regulation with the gateway. So let me now dive into the embedded web application. So remember, we're still at the customer's house. We're still directly connected to the gateway. The customer has the option of opening a laptop, a tablet, phone, and connect directly to the gateway. Now, this supports multiple users. Not everybody needs to be an admin, and I'll explain how powerful the admin is. So you can actually have the choice of giving different credentials to different people who might need to monitor the system, but maybe they don't need full control. The first thing, once you log in, you run into the dashboard. In my opinion, this is what most of the customers love. The connections the lines, the green dots that you see here on the screen is actually animated. So it's real time. They're moving in the direction of power. You also have at a glance information on how much the solar is producing. You have what's going on with the batteries. If there is a battery monitor in the system, then you'll have access to state of charge. If not, only voltage. I can see my devices. And from here, I can actually click into the device and dive into the device a little bit deeper and find out what's going on. Dashboard, then you go to battery summary. Here in battery summary, now I have availability to look at what's happening to my batteries, voltage, current, and I can look at it based on time. And also, if I want to isolate it, a specific area. So like what you see here on the screen, I'm a little concerned of what's happening here. So I want to go dive a little bit deeper. I can actually zoom in this hour or 2 hours and go a little bit deeper and see what's happening here. For all of this, I actually can download the information either into a PDF or a CSV file, which will allow me to compare several days at a glance. Continuing on down to the dashboard, we go to battery comparison. And now we have several options to compare up to 5 different battery banks. And I can actually look at what their voltages are based on the time and or current. And just like all of the others, I have the possibility of downloading this information. Moving down to energy, and here I have this dashboard that gives me at a glance. I have it set to lifetime right now. So as you can see, this is all lifetime solar energy produced, battery energy discharge, load energy, battery energy charge, sell to the grid, and then consumed from the grid, and whatever the generator power was consumed. And this is lifetime, but I can actually dive a little bit deeper all together for the total system. And then lastly, for the dashboard is energy consumption. And here I have 4 choices. And again, I can go based on day, hour, month, or year. But the choices are grid output, grid input, generator input, and load output. You can actually check and uncheck them. So if the graph is starting to look really busy, I can actually start peeling it back and building based on if I'm doing some troubleshooting with that system. And just like every other dashboard, you can download this information into a .pdf or CSV. Okay, so I just gave you a general view of this system. All of the dashboard is giving me system totals. So now I want to show you what I can do for each device. In the devices menu, I can get the device overview, and I have the choice of showing them either in a list format or icon, which is what you see on my screen right now. And I have all of my devices in this network. You see I have 2 XWs, I have 2 MPPT80s, I have an MPPT60, and I have a system control panel. Battery monitor under, you don't see it that well. At a glance, I actually can see, let's take a look at this first inverter. I can see that the inverter is operational. It's in the status sell to the grid. It is the master, and I have some data here that I can look at. But let's say I'm curious about what's happening with this inverter. I could from here double click on the icon, and I will go into the status of that device. So you know that I'm actually looking at this device because on the right side you have the inverter icon and you have the inverter ID. So I know I'm looking at the master inverter. Now I have more information of what it's doing beyond just being sold to the grid. If we dive down here, let's take a look at a couple of data points here. Obviously, there's a lot. So we see that we are pulling minus 2.59 amps from the batteries. Then we see the inverter DC current. Then we see inverter DC power. We see temperature, specifically of this particular device in the net. For this device, I have multiple choices beyond just looking at the status of the product right now. I can look at performance, events, configurations, diagnostics, and firmware. Diving into some of those areas, so here's the performance of this inverter. Maybe I have a concern that there's something different between this inverter and the other inverter in the system. So now I'm looking at what this inverter is doing, and I can look at based on hours, days, month, or year. And I have choices here. Yep, simply clicking on these boxes, I will actually make this bar graph change. So maybe I'm not interested in DC energy in. I can disable that, and now the graph will start looking a little more easy to digest the information. I have at a glance not just the system totals, but I can actually go in and look at each one of these devices in the performance bar. Configuration. And remember, we are still at the gateway. We're still at the system. So I have total control to all the parameters needed to program the system, not only just at the commissioning stage where I have to program the specific application for the customer. Remember, the XW as well as the SW leave the factory ready for an off-grid system. But if your customer is grid tie and your customer is going to do self-consumption, the customer is going to do net metering, so you have to program these. So all of these settings are available to you. Additionally, we don't know which batteries you're going to use. So you have to tell the inverter and you have to tell the charge controllers all of that information. So all of that is available to you directly on the gateway and to program the whole system from the platform. Now let's take a look at the charge controllers. It's funny, but I wanted to point it out. And some of you may be looking at my screen and go, wait a minute, there's two MPPT80s and one PPT60. Why would you do that? Well, in reality, I did it for the presentation. I want to share that we can mix. It's no problem. Reality of a customer wanting to do that may be low, but it is perfectly okay to have these two models in the same system. But now, if I look here, I have a concern because my first MPPT80 doesn't seem to be working. Let me click on the icon of the first MPPT80 and go in and see what's going on, right? So now I go to the performance graph of that MPPT80 and I can start looking at what's happening. Why is this MPPT80 not charging at this moment? The graph right now, if you see DC energy in and DC energy out, although for most systems, these two data points track, and you see that on the screen. The DC in and out is very close to each other for obvious reasons, because the charge controller can't use energy in if it can't put it into the battery. What I'm seeing here in the graph is very normal of what's happening. Maybe there's a different reason why at this moment that charge controller was not charging, right? So beyond the performance, just like on the other devices, I can actually switch between times and download the information to compare. Up to now, we have talked about what can I do, how powerful the gateway is locally at the customers connected to Wi-Fi or connected to the gateway's hotspot. Let's get out and talk about what can I do remotely. Not only us as professional installers, which may have a portfolio of sites, but also for the customer. What can the customer do remotely using our cloud-based Insight2, which is available to the customers who bought the gateway? So it's very powerful, in my opinion, for installers, because now I actually have, at a glance, all of my sites. I can actually see all of my sites together. I can give access, I can give permissions to the owner, depending of how much control you want to give them. But I can also use this as a marketing tool, because maybe I have a customer that says, hey, I'm really interested. What can I do with this system? And you can give temporary access as a view only to one of your sites to a potential client. that can actually navigate the site, see what's happening, and maybe make a decision of buying the product based on that. First step, we got to get signed up. So we're going to go to the Conext Insight website, and we're going to get ourselves signed up and register, fill all this information, very typical, nothing unusual here. As soon as you click sign in, you're going to get automatically an email which will ask you to check on a link. And that's just simply so that we can validate that we have your email. And once you validated your email, then you log in. The first time you log in, there's nothing, right? There's an empty spot with nothing in because you haven't created anything yet. So my first step is to create my site. Very typical information here. You see the red marks are your mandatory fields, but then you have some optional fields. Maybe you want to upload a photo of the site. Maybe you want to have some files. It's really interesting. Once you have so many sites, then you start forgetting minor details of each site. It may be a good idea to have the system drawing here so that you can quickly remember, oh yeah, this customer had a 5K array and it was facing west, right? Why is it not producing, or maybe not exactly facing south? So all that information is to help you when you need to remember the specifics on the site. To set the location of the customer, you can actually enter the physical address, or for some of our off-grid customers, you have the option of GPS coordinates. And now you see I've created my site. Now the map has a green check mark on the position, the location of my site in some of the relevant information here when it was created. Now I have an empty site, a location, nothing, no information, no data. Why? Because we need to tell this site which gateway. But let me add this part. Let's say I got my gateway installed during commissioning. I connected the gateway to the Wi-Fi of the customer, either wirelessly or run a Cat5 cable. But that gateway has been on the internet since the weekend. But I didn't have time till now to come to the office and create the site. That's perfectly fine because the gateway started sending data to the server as soon as you connected it to the internet. And the server is just simply saving that data because it doesn't know where to put it. So it's not like you've lost the data. So as soon as you put in this information specific of the gateway, right? This is the ID number, or in the gateway menu, we call URN. And then obviously the serial number will actually create your site. So a couple of things I want to show you of the homepage. The homepage will look like this. And there's two columns that are really important. The connectivity online, meaning that gateway is online right now. And the last data refresh needs to be the last 15 minutes. Otherwise, what you're getting is not real-time data. You will have data because the gateway has pushed data to the server. But if you're not connected online and if it's not refreshed, then it won't be real-time data available. Let me move on to the next one, which is a portfolio of sites. So here you see a number of sites. And of course, my site, my home, is disconnected. But I know why. My gateway is not plugged into the internet. But at a glance, you can actually see what's happening to your sites. I see now the other sites are online, they're fine. Here I have a site with a battery very low in state of charge. These power gauges are accumulative of your sites. And something else you can do from this home view is from the download button, you can actually download all of them at once. You have 10, 20, hundreds of sites, and you wanted to see them all at a glance, you can download that information because the home view is only going to display, I believe, up to 10 or so sites. Then it will ask you to click second page to show you more. So if you really wanted to analyze all of your sites, you can actually download them and see them at a glance. And then let me show you something else before I move on. Right here on the home page, I already could tell I have one of my sites with an alert. Right? Obviously, I could tell what it is. It's right here. But let's say it was one of the sites that were in different pages and I couldn't see it at a glance. It's already letting me know, hey, there's one with an alert. And if there was any warnings, then you could actually see it right here before you start diving. Let's grab one of the sites and let's go in and look at its specific information. So the first thing you see here is this is now on Insight2. This is now through a cloud server, so anyone with access anywhere in the world can actually look at this site. But you see that my dashboard looks very similar to what the customer is used to using the gateway directly. But now he's actually maybe at his office. Maybe he was traveling and he wanted to see what's going on at his house. Maybe his teenagers were having a party and he wanted to see what was going on. But you see how very similar the information is, although not animated right now, but in real life, this is real time animated. You see the arrows moving in the direction of the power. You will see data off of each device at a glance, and I can take a look and see what my batteries are doing. This particular site doesn't have a battery monitor, so this is why the state of charge is displaying 0, but you still have the voltage setting, so you can see what the battery voltage is. Now I can look at multi-site. So in my case, because I have multiple sites in my system, I can actually look at them and compare them up to 25 at once. So I can look at all of my sites and go see what's going on with them from here. I picked 2 of my sites because I am having reports that this one site is underperforming. I know these 2 sites are very close to each other, regionally speaking, so I picked them to see why is this first site producing so much more power. I have now the choice of looking at different days, and I can start looking back. Is there something different has happened to this second site? Why is it half or less than half production than the other side? I know they're exactly the same in PV size. I can start narrowing it down and analyzing why one may be having an issue. I can't also do batteries, grid. So I have multiple choices here on what I can compare. And again, up to 25 sites. I wanted to make it simple. I know sometimes it's hard to see these graphs when you're doing a webinar. So I just put 2 sites in, and I picked 2 sites that were very clearly different, having a different performance, so I can demonstrate. But then we can actually continue on to energy gauges. And so in energy gauges, I have the total energy consumption, production, different information for that particular site. And here in advanced analysis, you see this is your very typical graph of what's happening to this site. You have the solar production, then you have some of the export power to the grid. And this is really interesting because this site is doing load shaving after the sun goes down. So they want to continue utilizing their power beyond the solar hours. What is happening here pretty much every day is you see that around 8:39, they'll utilize energy stored during the day. On the right, we have a graph specific about the charge controllers. This specific site has 3 MPPT80s, and then you can see them, what they did today in hour per hour to see. And you can see some differences here. And this is the reason is because they're not all facing the same direction. The arrays are not exactly the same. Then we can look at events. We have a couple of choices with events here. This particular site has had 2 anti-islanding events. 2 things happen here is I'm told what date, what time, which event code in a description. It tells me what happened. In this case, again, anti-islanding fault. So these are issues with the grid. But I can also have different. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm jumping a slide here. Apologize. Let me talk about this, and then I'll go back to the users. Back to the event. I actually have the choice of getting these emailed to me, and I can decide what I'm going to get emailed to me. I can actually have everything be emailed to me, or I could just say, okay, I just want alarms. I just want the important serious stuff be emailed to me. Okay, so let me backpedal a little bit here to the user rights. Again, Insight2, cloud server, so we're remote, we're monitoring, and I actually can have multiple layers. As you can see, the first person on my site here is the admin. The admin has total control, and then we have total control, total view, can see all the graphs, can see all the settings, can make all the changes. Then we got to the technical end user, can see everything, can see the graphs, can use the analytics, can download reports, can see the settings, but cannot make any changes. And then we have the basic or end user, which just simply gets to see the information and doesn't make any change. So now about programming changes. With Insight2, you have total control of any of the parameters that your system may need. So maybe there's beyond the original commissioning. I always have this discussion with installers. If a system is properly programmed in commissioning, there's really very little that needs to be adjusted. However, recently having this chat with an installer, and he was telling me that it saved him a 3-hour drive to go see what was going on. That's where this becomes powerful, because maybe we don't know why the generator didn't start it. The batteries are getting low. Maybe we need to do a manual on to the generator. Right? Maybe we need to force the inverter to charge the batteries. There's a number of different things, part of the troubleshooting. In the customer I was talking to this week, he actually shared with me that he sells this service to his customers. Beyond the installation, beyond the commissioning, his customers are paying him a service fee, and he's doing most of it using Insight2. And he reviews the information and is able to correct many of the issues, sometimes related to customers looking around and making changes without knowing what they're doing. Other times, as things are changing, we need to be making changes to a system based on the time of the year. We're not producing as much during the wintertime. Maybe that's something else you can consider. Everything that is available to you locally, either using the system control panel or the gateway, is available to you using Insight2. All of the menus are available here for all of the devices. So you can actually, if you wanted to, do all of the commissioning settings using the platform and not doing it locally. One detail that I want to share with you, because we've had a few feedback from customers of not being able to make changes. Here's an important thing when you're making changes, that and maybe I should say we probably should clean up the description a little bit. But when you try to make a change, you will see this window. And it's not super straightforward, but what it's asking you here is the admin credentials of the gateway. If you do not have admin credentials and you try to make a change, it will not. It will give you an error. In the last few weeks, I was investigating because I had a customer saying, I can't make changes. And diving in a little bit deeper, realized, well, you don't have admin credentials, and he actually forgotten his password. But that's very important, because you're not making the changes on Insight2, where you're actually making the changes on the gateway. So here you're actually going to be making the changes and needing the admin credentials for the gateway for the setting to take. Another tip, which is coming handy for me, I try to make one change at a time. Sometimes I've had issues with internet connectivity. One change at a time seems to be working really well for me, although it's true that you can't make multiple changes at once and then apply all together. I have found best results to do them one at a time. Thank you so much. I know how busy everybody is, and stay tuned for the next week's training. Thank you, everybody.